Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Diagnostics Conference week, session number 2. Wanted to mention in advance today that if you have any questions, you can use the chat on the YouTube stream, and then we'll look at the questions afterwards at the end of the presentation. Good. I'm going to introduce Koen Porteners. He's the lead solutions architect for the diagnostics product, and his presentation today is about monitoring myths. Koen?
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to the second presentation in our journey towards easier application management. Like John said, I'm going to talk to you about myths today, and these will be myths about monitoring the GE Smallworld application. Yesterday, we took our first step in the journey of easier application management, and Paul Meester has explained the current way of working around IT systems, and he has talked to you about the 4 different types of work, and that if you do not have a monitoring solution in place, you will find yourself mainly doing one type of work, which is the unplanned work, and you will be reacting to problems and become a slave of the ticketing system. And because of that, there will be no time to innovate. So there is a very good reason to properly add monitoring to your GE Smallworld application. And that brings me to my session today. There are multiple ways in which you can add monitoring to your Smallworld application. And by going over 5 monitoring myths, I will explain to you why we chose the design for diagnostics that we did and that we have been developing for the past 9 years. So before I start off with the 5 myths, I quickly want to give you some context about why we want to do monitoring, and there are multiple reasons to do it. First reason to add monitoring is to get confirmation for yourself that everything that is supposed to be running is actually running. By doing that, if you come in the morning, you can get confirmation for yourself that everything that needs to be online is online and that you can start your day in quiet. The second reason to put monitoring in place is so that you have information to pinpoint issues. So by logging all of the user and system activities, if there is an issue, you can go back in time and you can look at the buildup of the issue so that you can reproduce and fix it. Adding detailed monitoring to your Smallworld application also allows you to predict what's going to happen in the future. A good example of this is the database growth. If you take snapshots of the size of the database files and the alternatives in it, you will be able, for example, to make a projection of when you're going to reach your critical limit and will run out of superfiles. Another reason to add monitoring is so you can get alerted about fault situations in the system. It doesn't really matter if they are user errors or system errors, but if you have this monitoring in place, you can get an alert and you can act immediately, reducing the amount of downtime. And then one more reason to add monitoring is to make data-driven decisions. You can imagine if you run a Smallworld application, you will have a lot of users. That can be multiple hundred, multiple thousands of users. And proper monitoring is a good way to get feedback from all of those users in a very objective manner as well. So you can see exactly what's used, what's not used, and what's going well and what people have difficulties with. And that allows you to address the issues that are most prominent and to spend your maintenance budget where it will actually have the most effect. And then our subject, of course, that will be GE Smallworld, but it will be all of the components of GE Smallworld, because you need all of those components to get your solution working. So there will be user interfaces to it. Maybe you're still running classic interface, maybe it will be Swift, Smallworld 4, Smallworld 5. GSS servers will be in place, job servers, batch processes, database servers themselves. All of those components together make up the GE Smallworld platform. So if you're going to talk about monitoring for GE Smallworld, we talk about monitoring all of those components. So with this context, I'm going to start with the 5 myths. If you talk about monitoring, one of the places where people start is adding print lines to the code. And this makes a lot of sense because everything that the application does is defined by its code. So if you want to know what the application is doing, you can add some output to the code. The problem with this is that the code is made by developers. So the print lines that you're going to find in your code are also made by developers and will only cover situations that they will expect where issues can occur. But that's just a very small subset. And in addition to that, the print lines will go into the Smallworld log file, which will be stored maybe on the user machine, maybe somewhere on Citrix, on another file share. So if you need access to it, you might have a hard time actually getting to the file. So it's a good place to start. It makes sense to do it, but you will lack a lot of context. You can add timestamps and durations to the log manually if you want, but you still don't have information about what the user was actually trying to achieve or what other parts of Smallworld were doing at the same time. Another common way to add monitoring to any system, and that includes Smallworld, is to set up external probing. In Smallworld, you can achieve this by making web requests to the GSS server, for example, and you can do that every 10 minutes. And if the request comes back, you mean everything is running fine. If the request does not come back, you know that there's an issue. It sounds very simple, and it's effective in finding the symptoms. Because it treats Smallworld as a black box, you will know if it's not responding. So that's good information, but it will give you no information whatsoever to make a root cause analysis. So knowing that something is wrong is nice, of course, but still it will be a needle in the haystack search to actually resolve the issue. Then, of course, Smallworld is made up of multiple components, as I told you in the beginning, and that's basically true for every IT system. So they are composed of multiple services that run across multiple systems, and they will be run by processes. So any kind of monitoring solution can tell you whether processes are running or not. And we call those monitoring solutions horizontal solutions because they can scratch the surface of basically any IT system that you are running. The problem here is that running does not mean that it's actually running well. So suppose that you have 2 job servers and 2 GSS servers, and your horizontal monitoring solution may say, well, all of those 4 processes are running. Still, users can have issues because maybe the job server is running but it's not doing any processing. Maybe the GSS server is online but is not receiving any requests. So simply confirming that things are running is not enough. You need to look inside to confirm that it's also doing what it's supposed to do. And that's what the difference is between a horizontal and a vertical solution, because a vertical solution is able to look inside of those specific system, like Diagnostics can do for Smallworld. It looks inside Smallworld and tells you if everything is running, but also if it's not, what the issue is. A fourth myth is one that's very easy to fool yourself, and is also something that we like to think. So if nobody complains, it must mean that everything is fine. This is of course not true, but it might even be worse than you think, because it has to do a lot with the personality of people, their experiences, their expectations. For example, people might run into an issue, but they blame themselves. They will think, my training has been so many years ago, I must not have remembered how to do it, I'll just spend another day trying to figure it out by myself. Or they might think that it's a system issue, and they don't bother reporting it to you because they think you can't do anything about it anyways. And then there's the other way around. So sometimes people will complain and there is no issue because they just want to complain about it. So if you have proper monitoring in place, the decision of whether something is an issue or not is actually moved from the user to yourself. And you can see for every type of issue how many people are affected, and you can classify it and even solve it before people will come to you. And if you do it like that, in the end you will also have a better system and a better user experience. And if the user experience is better, it means people will be more productive, which will make your system overall more efficient. And then one more myth that I want to cover is more alerts do not equal more information. And this is a pitfall for anyone who starts to do monitoring, because it's very exciting. So the moment you start to add monitoring to your system, a wealth of information will be unlocked for you, and you want to share this information. So you're going to set up an email and send an alert to your manager automatically saying this is all going fine, this is going wrong. Maybe you send an email every week automatically, everybody is happy. But as soon as you start to extend this set of alerts that you have, maybe you're sending out 10 emails every day, or even worse. And the problem with that is that people, at first they read the emails, and at some point they will be comfortable because the email always says everything is okay. They will no longer look into it, and they will just assume that everything is fine. On the other hand, if you send a notification that says there is a huge issue, go fix it, people will be inclined to actually go have a look, of course, but if it appears to be a false positive, next time the notification comes in, they will think it's probably a false positive again. So be very careful, and a great rule of thumb is to only send out notifications for issues that are actual issues, but also issues that people can fix. So they should be actionable. Do not send out any messages saying everything is fine. That is supposed to be standard. So if everything is okay, keep it to yourself. There are dashboards where you can look at the current state. They will confirm that everything is fine. Reserve the notifications for the actionable and insights if something is wrong. Then you will get the most out of your monitoring solution. So those were the 5 myths. I hope I've convinced you all they are all busted, because those myths actually also have influenced the design of diagnostics as it is today. So for diagnostics, we made the following design decisions. It's going to proactively produce events about everything in Smallworld. So all of the user actions, all of the system actions, all of the statuses of all of the systems will be monitored. And this information is going to be sent into a central location. So there is an index which contains all of those events, saying this person clicked here, this query has been performed, so many sessions have been started. It's coming together in one central location in real time where you can search it immediately. Then there are dashboards where you can look at the current state and where you can make historical analysis. And on the other hand, there will be unattended analysis that's going to send out alerts only if something needs to be acted on. So, as yesterday, we have a question of the day. Yesterday we had the first session, so there was a question from Paul. If you have answered all of the sessions from all the questions from all 5 sessions this week, you can submit your answers into a form that we will send to you after the 5th session. So if you know the answer, just remember it for yourself. After the last session on Friday, you will receive a questionnaire. You can fill it all in, and you can have a chance to win one of the diagnostics mugs that you can show off in the office. So here comes the question for today. How many application monitoring solutions can show you the reason why a GSS request is processed slowly? You don't need to remember the answer for Friday. The question itself will also be part of the questionnaire that you will receive. So that concludes my talk for today. Tomorrow, we will take the next step on our journey towards easier application management, and we will have a presentation by Gert Wijsman. And Gert will talk to you about privacy and GDPR, which is the European regulations on how to process personal data. And he's going to tell you how that affects diagnostics and also other processes in your organization. So be sure to catch that presentation as well. That brings me to the end of my presentation. So we will switch back to John, see if there are some questions coming in.
Great. So let me get the iPad, see the stream, see what kind of questions we've got. We've got some. What have we got? Yeah. Hey, we've got a question, but it's about yesterday's presentation. Wonderful. Let's see what we can do. Yesterday, Paul mentioned the advantage of not having to reproduce an error in Cambridge. Does this mean that GE is also able to use diagnostics to solve issues that are hard to reproduce?
Yeah, that is actually one of the big benefits of diagnostics, because it's giving you a lot of context for this situation. So if you have diagnostics running at the time where the error is occurring, that will give you all of the context that any other person, so maybe GE, maybe yourself, all of the context that this person needs to reproduce, get into the same error state. And that will be the first step to finding the solution as well. So definitely yes.
Great. Don't see any of the questions at the moment, but I have a question for you. So one of the things that we've been approached with lately is having the data connect with Power BI. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yes, of course. So I've mentioned the difference between the dashboards to look at the current state and the historical analysis and the alerts for the notifications about error situations. Power BI is a great way to do dashboarding. So you can loop all of the diagnostics events and all of those dashboards into Power BI. So you can make one dashboard that covers Smallworld, but also other systems in your organization. And Power BI is great for that.
Okay, good. Thank you. No other questions as of yet, so I'm going to ask another question. There was also a discussion that we had in the past with respect to robotic monitoring. Could you elaborate a little bit on what that means?
Yeah, so robotic monitoring means that you will have not a person, but a robot that is going to simulate user behavior. So that's much like probing the system. So making this 10-minute GSS request that I mentioned before, but it can also be some kind of script that simulates user clicks. But it will be the same script every time, which is fine. But the problem of that is the same as with the probing. So you will notice the symptom, meaning the test will fail, but you will not have any information in addition to that to perform root cause analysis.
Okay, great. We have two more questions. So ready? The problem happens in GE's code. So this question was specifically about GE's help desk ability to use diagnostics. That was referring to the original question.
Yeah. So what diagnostics will do, it's going to give context to reproduce the problem. So if the problem is in the core code of GE, and GE has not been able to fix it because they have not been able to reproduce it, diagnostics can help a lot there, because it gives you all of the context to reproduce the original issue. If it's a problem in the source code that is actually already reproducible, but it's not yet fixed, diagnostics can still help, because it may shine a light on things that are going on at the same time that GE might not be aware of at the moment. But there's always a possibility that some issues are not fixable. But diagnostics will definitely make sure that it's reproducible. And that's always the first and one of the most important steps into finding a fix.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next question. What kind of issues are most found through diagnostics?
Aha! That's a nice one. Yeah. Well, things that are there's of course the lack of indexes, which happens a lot for many customers. Um, and that's typically something that is not appears as an issue to a user, but it will actually make the application very slow. Because if you don't have the index, simply loading one screen might take a minute instead of 3 seconds. And that's something that will be apparent with diagnostics very easily. In terms of actual issues, they can be things like streams exhausted, ACPs that are crashing, user errors where they input wrong values when trying to update an object, for example. Yeah, those are prominent. And there's also issues about running out of memory, for example, but they happen less frequently. It's mainly user-related errors.
Okay, I have a long one here. You mentioned that too many alerts in the end make monitoring almost irrelevant. Diagnostics has monitoring. How does the alerting in diagnostics differ and make the monitoring relevant again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect question. That I've mentioned the phrase unattended analysis. So that means that all of the data that's gathered by diagnostics from all those Smallworld sessions gets into this thing called an index, which is the central searchable location. And the diagnostics alerts, they are basically automated searches that will check for common fault situations. And they will run continuously, whether you are watching the dashboards or not. Those searches will be there and they will see, is there a process not running that's supposed to be running? Is there a session that runs out of memory? Do we get, well, plenty of things that can go wrong, they will be checked for. Are we running out of licenses? And if nothing is wrong, you won't hear about it. But the check will happen. And actually, you will get an alert only if there's something to act on. So if you almost run out of licenses, there's only a few left, then diagnostics will start to send out an email to you, or any other notification for that matter. It's by default an email. But it has also checked it 99 times before where it was all fine, and you will not hear about it. So it will only involve you if you are needed. If you're curious about the past state, you can always take the initiative yourself, go to the dashboards, and you will get the complete history of the license usage or the error messages or the application servers. But the searches will always happen automatically as well, but you will only be involved if there's something that you need to look at.
So we call that intelligent alerting.
You can.
Great. Good. Getting close to the end here. We don't have any other questions. Let me just wait for a minute to see if there's any other questions coming up. Okay, none at this point in time. Good. I'm going to close the session. As Koen mentioned, we have tomorrow the GDPR session. I can't wait for that. It's going to be very, very interesting. Thank you, everyone, for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.